Hey guys, it's Dr. Jensen, and welcome to your last module of Media and Crime, Module 8, Crime, Media, and Movements. So this is actually a new module for this class, and all of this material is completely new and different this semester as compared to past semesters. So I'm really excited to bring you some new content. Let's get started. So moving into part 1, I'm going to move myself around just a little bit. We will cover the following agenda. First, we'll talk briefly about media and movements. Then we will discuss viral videos. And finally, the Kuleshov effect. So mediated mobilization is a term I want you to get familiar with. And what we mean by that is social movements and community organizing that are facilitated through the use of social media tools and the internet. So how is this different than any other social movement of the past? Well, it has a lot of the same structure, right? It's just a means of communication. But because we live in an age where global communities are within our fingertips, this has allowed for unprecedented communication and contact with each other. And so essentially, you can have things like fundraising campaigns, awareness and outreach by using things like social media and hashtags and GoFundMe pages and all kinds of stuff, and literally raise money in moments. You can literally send a message and drive people to activism and protest within minutes. And we've seen this happen for a number of years now. So because we have contact with each other in our pocket, often by virtue of our phone or by computers, pretty regularly, we get this kind of contact. So essentially, it's harnessing the power of media, particularly social media, to do some community organizing for all sorts of causes. And this is, I don't want to say new because it's been around for a while, but it's now accelerating and intensifying in ways we've never seen before. So essentially, when we talk about social movements, what we mean is social movements are direct interventions aimed at changing an existing condition in society. And it's deemed as some kind of social injustice by using new media to galvanize people to mobilize and carry out collective actions such as social campaigns, protests, demonstrations, and flash mobs. So these can be carried out in any number of ways, but essentially this is, collective intervention on some kind of cause. If you take my terrorism class, we talk about how often that can be pushed to an extreme where people feel marginalized, they feel not listened to, they feel pushed to the edges of society. And if they feel like their collective action is not effective, that can drive them into very serious and violent behavior, the extreme point of which is terrorism. But essentially, when you think about it, at its root, all terrorism actually starts with a social movement. But no, not all social movements are terrorism. In fact, the vast majority of them are not. Hardly any of them are considered terrorist organizations or conduct terrorist acts. That is extreme behavior, and we're looking at behavior that's more typical or kind of average when we talk about people who are organizing themselves for a cause. New media are used to maintain the communication channels with the constituencies and cultivate the membership. So essentially, media is there to grow, and that's literally what cult or cultivate means, is to grow. In Greek, it means to grow. So it's there as basically a tool of the organization. It's interesting how different social media outlets and organizations regulate their activity. We're kind of getting into more and more regulation. But first, let's take a brief moment to talk about the viral video. All right, so the viral video is essentially film and photography that purport to capture events as they really took place in the world. And essentially, it's usually some kind of interesting or fascinating thing. Maybe it's an epic fail. Maybe it's a phenomena that's hard to pull off or do. There are all kinds of viral videos, right, that show things like trick shots or places you've never been, or some really funny reaction that makes you laugh. So viral videos have all kinds of purposes and target audiences. But when we talk about viral videos that capture crime, we get into really serious territory. So when we see a viral video, and essentially a lot of viral videos have gone around about police encounters, because often videos are not permitted in the court and definitely not permitted in a correctional facility. So it's harder to go viral in those arenas of criminal justice. So most of the time when we see viral videos, it has to do with law enforcement. It's always very tempting to take those viral videos at their word, but often multiple viral videos are going viral or catching fire across a really big crowd of people. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of views, upwards to millions of views by people. And when you get these multiple videos, they can present multiple possible truths and perspectives. So essentially, we are stuck with which one is to be believed. We'll go into this in more detail in a moment, but that's what we're getting after with viral videos. So despite the widespread creation and dissemination of video online, people still seem to believe that cameras depict the world as it really is. This goes back to all the surveillance stuff we talked about in prior modules, that if it's on camera, it's actual behavior. But we have to remember that much of the behavior we see visually is also contextualized. And we're going to respond to it and make different assumptions about it based on the before, during, and after of the event. So someone running away from a scene might look like they're fleeing police, but in reality, we didn't know that there was a fire inside the building that they're trying to escape. So there are all kinds of things that might justify or contextualize the behavior, but it's not represented in the video. So the truth comes from finding the right material from the right camera. And who is going to be totally honest with when they record and how they record and then how it is shared? It's sometimes very complicated to do that. That idea is actually kind of flawed and mistaken, and it's bringing forth just as much animosity and polarization that's thought to produce the conflicts that the cameras actually record. And sometimes people are just ready to film the unrest in the world, and it can be really, really frustrating and overwhelming to watch. So there are literally dozens, hundreds of these latent potential viral videos in our social media landscape that appear by the hour, sometimes by the minute. And basically, they are all potential flashpoints for online controversy if they're selected and framed appropriately. So we go back to the frames that we talked about in this class and how they represent different perspectives of criminal behavior, society's responsibility with criminal behavior, and the criminal justice system. And add to that an explosive convergence of race, religion, and ideological beliefs against a national backdrop of political tension. And basically, you have set the stage for the viral moment. And people are hungry to see kind of social injustices in action, or what they might perceive to be social injustices and maybe are not actually happening. So essentially, video footage demonstrates just how easy it is to find provocative moments in otherwise ordinary sequences of events. There's nothing terribly exciting about a traffic stop, even though that's one of the most dangerous things that an officer can do, right? Because there are all kinds of factors that come into play that make that incident very unpredictable. Okay, so there's an old dispute in film theory. So we're going to kind of pull back to the communications parts of this class. And essentially, there's a dispute between form and content as far as how things are manipulated and edited, okay? Form and content. So form is kind of how it's presented. Content is the raw material. For most people, the meaning of moving images seems to relate to the footage inside them, the people, the settings, and events that the camera was pointed at and actually captured. But in fact, the way those elements were selected, edited, and represented has an enormous impact on the way they are received and understood. What does this sound like? Yep, the social construction of reality. It goes back to symbolic interactionism and phenomenology, when we are taking our own experiences and ideas and using them as symbols and representations to derive meaning from what's happening. So we're going to go back to the kinds of images, ideas, and information that we know and is familiar to us to sort out what's in front of us, and essentially take some shortcuts to make life easier and come to some conclusion about what is happening before us. So with the viral video, often you'll see a viral video presented, and then you'll get news outlets weighing in on it and lots of arguments about what's actually happening in the video. So arguments will likely continue back and forth with individuals, legislatures, and media outlets, each offering their own take on the original video. So you get into all this interpretation and subjectivity and all the information that has seeped out from it since. But fewer will acknowledge the role of the video itself in manufacturing real and actual effects, no matter how the surrounding circumstances motivated or contextualized them. So the internet makes it super easy to come to simple and quick conclusions and spread those answers as truth before verification. Just a quick sidebar. I remember when I was in college many years ago as an undergrad, this would have been in the late 90s, early 2000s. So the internet was kind of emerging and being born. Essentially, one of our chapters in our research methods class was how to authenticate information as real and legitimate. And that chapter is probably out of date today. But essentially, we were trying to find sources of information that we could feel certain about, things like how do I get data or information on certain social behaviors and phenomenon. And, how do you know this is a real website instead of a fake website? We talked a lot about credentials. We talked a lot about authentication. And so that was my early learning in my 20s, where I had to try to come up with my plan to determine whether a website was legitimate or not. And this was in, between 1998 and 2004, 2005. YouTube was not even born yet, right? YouTube has really only been around since about 2005. And Facebook well after that. So some of these social media platforms are still relatively young in the social schema. But yeah, it was really interesting to say, okay, well, what would I look for on a website to make sure I'm actually at the right place, reading the right thing, and I'm not on some poser website or fake website. Essentially, I'm sorry, I got off track a little bit. But yeah, it was just kind of a funny way to venture into the unknown internet at the time. Viral videos, when we think about our smartphone cameras, right? And I've said this in prior modules, basically everyone carries a camera and becomes a journalist and can capture real events happening in real time. And so we can produce a swarm of videos with these kinds of machines, right? And we have better and better cameras coming out every year, and very sophisticated editing that comes with those cameras. However, this produces an infinite set of possible perspectives, real or faked, truthful or manipulative, all clamoring to present their edited rendition of events in front of the eyes and minds that would gestalt meaning from them. So the process of selection is kind of collective, all these thousands and millions of video cameras in everyone's pockets scrabbling for the first or the best attention. And, the media has been an active participant in this when you think about it. The media has often offered a lot of money for people to capture viral moments, right? Especially things like severe storms. They will pay you money for your video so that they have breaking news and exclusive footage and video that keeps the audience's attention. So that's a big deal. And we're like, okay, so they're kind of active participants in the construction of the viral video by paying people to make them. And of course, we are kind of, basically watching phenomena before our eyes. It's captivating, and we want information quickly, and we crave drama. It's just something that, it's like, watching a train wreck. It's hard to turn away. So essentially, when we first start talking about crime, media, and movements, we have to acknowledge the viral video. We have to acknowledge its limitations and some of the problems that it creates, but also some of the solutions it creates. Sometimes it is the kind of eyewitness to something going on. But oftentimes it has to be combined with other videos and other evidence and highly analyzed and scrutinized before it can even be admitted as evidence, right? So this is a very interesting time to be having this conversation on viral videos. But now we're going to turn into our final segment of part one, which is the Kuleshov effect. So there is a video that I have in this module that shows you how this effect actually works. But I wanted to give you kind of the background of it before you watched that video. So essentially the Kuleshov effect comes from Russia. And it's a really early film editing technique that's been around since the 20s and 30s when we first started to film. So essentially, it's a film editing effect featuring a cognitive event in which viewers derive more meaning from the interaction of two sequential shots than from a single shot in isolation. So it's making a combination of images to and place them in a certain sequence in order to lead you to a certain destination. And Kuleshov basically did this in his film, where he actually changed the order of certain shots of a man's face, and then, you know, would put a girl in a coffin after the man's face. He would put a bowl of soup before the man's face. And so we might start making assumptions about hunger or about motive or the involvement of this man with this girl, but just by changing the sequence, we are led to believe different things. And that's what we're talking about here with the Kuleshov effect. So this is something you would learn about in film school if you were studying to become a director. You'd learn about the Kuleshov effect. Or if you're going to be an editor, the Kuleshov effect is kind of a classic editing technique. So essentially, it's the placement of reaction shots, montages, and establishing shots that are meant to increase tension, invoke emotion, and brew suspense. And so essentially, they can lead us emotionally or intellectually on this journey to prepare us for a single shot later that's going to mean something intense to us. You see this used often in comedy. You see this used in horror. You see it used in romantic films and adventure films, where we start kind of setting up what's happening and what choices are in front of a character and why, and where their natural action is going to be drawn to based on these kinds of shots. So essentially, viral videos and other media can be sequenced in a similar manner. Now, if it's just a live streaming video that doesn't turn off, it's harder, obviously, to invoke the Kuleshov effect because, you know, and I've had students in communication and television and film classes do this before, where I have them watch their favorite show and count how many different camera angles happen in about a 2-minute course. And sometimes you get upwards of 30 to 60 shots. So when you think about it, if you have two people in a conversation, you have to get dialogue from one character to another. You have to get interaction. You have to get reaction shots. You have to get shots that establish kind of a close-up, kind of more of a perimeter shot. And when you change shots, it's hard to even notice because we're just so socialized to this. But it's trying to say we would be responding to each other's reactions, but we can't. We have to change camera angles to do that. And it's something we take for granted that our eyes would naturally provide. So that's the camera's best way to simulate a conversation so that we can get the emotion that's happening in the conversation by changing angles. But yeah, that's something you can do, is count how many shots you actually see in a 1 or 2 minute period. It's actually very incredible. And yeah, editing is a fascinating art. And so certainly a live stream versus an edited video would be different, but we do see the Kuleshov effect that works in viral videos. More on the Kuleshov effect. This actually serves as the backbone for reality television, meaning it's almost entirely produced in the editing room as far as when things are sequenced and when tension escalates or when celebrations occur. You just have to put it in the right order and you can drive that moment. The power of editing comes from something we call condensation, from a film's ability to compress events that unfold over a long period of time into one that takes place over just mere moments. So that way we can get to an emotional place or a plot point in the story a lot quicker than we would maybe in real life and keep the audience's interest. But today, the online video still relies on editing, of course, but even clips that appear uncut still participate in a version of the Kuleshov effect, where we're responding to different angles and different sequences. So in summary, the viral video, when we think about it, the truth on film is often more complicated than we give it credit. Video can capture narratives that people take as truths, offering evidence that feels incontrovertible. But the fact is, these visceral certainties can also very easily be called into question, and it offers us a good reason to trust video less, rather than more. And so we have to do a lot more analysis and a lot more digging before we just take a viral video at face value. And just remember, as a college student pursuing your degree, becoming more and more intellectual every day, good answers don't come this fast and this easily. Finding that objective truth in reality is much more complicated. So with that, we will wrap up part 1 of crime, media, and movements, but I felt like this was really necessary background and preparation before we just dive in. One last thing I want to say is you're probably going, Jensen, this is kind of hypocritical. We're going to be looking at viral videos in this module. And how can you sit there and be critical of viral videos when you're also sharing them? Well, we're kind of doing our own analysis and self-criticism. So use these viral videos that we discuss as a way to delve in to viral video moments and be a cynic, be a high critic of those, because often viral videos, especially in moments of law enforcement, can be life or death. They can be your job, getting fired or not, or being incarcerated. It can be you're in your trial. I mean, that is serious, serious stuff we're talking about, and it's incredibly consequential and life-changing. So if anything, you can be a skeptic looking at the viral videos in our module, and you should be a skeptic. So I want to offer that to you to say this also gives us content to consume and evaluate and offer our own critiques to that. So I'm not trying to be hypocritical in presentation of viral video. I'm just kind of giving us a chance to evaluate some of these ideas that I've put forward as well, and thinking about some of the emotions that are coming forward out of these videos too. So we will see you in part 2.